Our next session is one which I have been waiting for. Are times of offshoring ending? Let's welcome our panelist, Mr. Mohit Thukral. Mohit is the founder and managing partner of WiT, an accomplished business leader with over 2+ decades of experience. He was earlier the officer and business leader at Genpact and was leading the organization's largest vertical globally. And Manish, who is the president, India and South Asia at UiPath. He is responsible for overseeing business and technology units in the region. Joining UiPath India during its inception, his technical expertise lies in robotic process automation, enterprise integration, global consulting, and implementation. Joining them as session anchor, we have Ms. Anjali Singh, MD Corporate Bank Operations, Deutsche Bank. Anjali joined Deutsche Bank in March 2020 to head corporate banking operations. She has more than 25 years of work experience, mostly in financial services. Her biggest motto in life is to keep challenging oneself and learning. She sometimes shares her thoughts on her blog, We Learn, We Live.
Hello, everyone. I'm Anjali Singh, and it gives me great pleasure to be here this morning, part of the Spark conference for WiT, which is their first virtual conference in 2020. I am going to spend a couple of minutes on women in technology, WiT. It's a platform that is increasing women's participation in STEM. It strives to fill the gap in gender diversity to enable women to be able to participate more in STEM leadership. And it does that through 3 different ways: enable, engage, and employ. How they're doing engagement is through awareness, advocacy, mentoring, training. They're doing enabling through partnerships with learning organizations, skill building, and developing potential of all the women. And they're able to help these women in employment through the partnership they have with the top 100 STEM organizations. They've also created a job board, which is about pre-screening and training, which is included. And this helps them educate and set up all these women for success in STEM. As we look at STEM today, the US organizations have about 23% women in STEM. India is a little bit better, actually. It has about 34% women. However, unfortunately, as we move forward, these women tend to drop off in middle or senior positions, with the result that as you get into leadership, STEM again has a lack of women. So organizations like WiT are really going to help women be able to go through the entire journey, and we will see far more senior women in technology as we go forward. Spark is a virtual conference for WiT, and the theme of this conference is about accelerating the new normal. As all of us know, we're going through one of the worst pandemics that any of us would have lived through in our lives. It is something like nobody's ever seen before. Companies, government, people, all of us are struggling in how we need to change to adjust, and I think most people have done a fairly good job of it. However, as we come out at the end of this next year, what will the new normal look like? And what does it mean for all of us? What does it mean for companies? What does it mean for industry? What does it mean for work from home? What does it mean from the future of work? We always talked of the future of work being, something that we will reach. The Generation Z will work very differently from what we've known. The pandemic has become that catalyst that has brought the future of work into today. So the future is now here. And therefore, how are we all changing and what needs to change? The specific theme of this panel is going to be, are offshoring times ending? And offshoring, as most of you know, would be the IT BPM industry. India today, in fact, has about 4.1 million people employed in this industry. It contributes about 7.9% to the GDP growth of India. And it was anticipated to be at about 350 billion by 2025. To have this dialogue with me, I have 2 esteemed panelists that I'm very, very honored to welcome. Mohit Thukral, who's the CEO of WiT, and Manish Bharti, who's the CEO of UiPath. They both have extensive experience in this area of IT, BPM, and offshoring. And very excited to have you here. So welcome Mohit, welcome Manish. Looking forward to the dialogue with you in the next 40 minutes around this topic of, what's going to happen to offshoring, as well as how are we getting ready for the new normal that's sitting and waiting for us at the end of the year or so. So welcome. I want it to be a dialogue. I will address questions to each of you. However, if you think there's something you want to say, please go ahead and say it, because I don't want it to be question answer. It needs to be between all three of us. Manish, my first question would be to you. As we all know, we're part of the fourth industrial revolution. It's being called that with everything that's happening in digital and the disruption that's been happening over the past 6 to 7 years. So from that point of view, the BPM industry was already getting cannibalized with everything that was happening in digital. And you've been at the forefront of that. You've led it from the center. As the CEO of UiPath, you've actually been part or leading RPA, workflows, hyper-automation. So where do you think the world is going now? As the pandemic ends, is this going to become even more of a demand? Are CEOs going to want to accelerate that digital journey? Because they might have lost this year, or this might have been a slowed year for them. How do you see the world being when you come at the other end of it next year? So two parts of it. How is it going now? Are you still seeing a demand? And at the end of it, 2021, what do you think will happen to the whole digital journey of this BPM IT sector in India?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Anjali. First of all, many congratulations to WiT for having this initiative at the center, and kind of fostering women in leadership. I think this is the need of the hour. I honestly felt so. And especially the mentorship part of it, which is of great value. And I had the honor of being a mentor as well. So I really loved it. So thank you, WiT, and greetings everyone, whoever is on the conference. Yeah, Anjali. So I'll just rewind a bit and give you the context about this. I basically divide the companies largely in India into two buckets. One, which are digitally native companies, companies who have started their digital journey 4 or 5 years ago, and they're pretty mature, because that's part of their daily working lives. Their employees kind of use digital technologies in various shapes and forms, and deliver, the end results to their stakeholders, whether internal or customer. And the companies who basically started a little late and were in the midway from the realization perspective, benefit realization perspective, and we're kind of pulled back because of this pandemic, obviously because of the priorities getting changed, internally. So what I see currently, the companies which were digitally native, they continue to be like that because they have seen the benefits of it. I don't see any change in strategies in terms of driving adoption within their different business lines, and they continue to invest, because they realize the benefit is far more than what they would have thought otherwise, just before pandemic. Companies which have started their journey, and they were midway and all, they also continue to invest, not at the same pace, because they have different priorities, and I won't say they are smaller companies, they're also big companies, but they are more stuck at the problems of customers, because as I was talking to some of my colleagues as well, if you think about, say, just consider the landscape, overall Indian landscape, we have like over $150 billion outsourcing industry as of today, and this primarily lives on the outsourcing model, the customers outsource their work to Indian companies, and we kind of deliver it from India. So there is a change in the model. It is getting evolved. And that's where the companies, the newer set of companies who were trying to be digitally native, they are focusing on retaining their businesses at this point in time, more so than focusing on the large digital investment. So as a company, we personally feel that our there is no impact on our business in the last 6 months. We continue to forecast the same number in India globally, and there is no change in that. That's a positive sign for us. And we realize, and there is another set of companies who were not on digital, and there's a very interesting trend in India, like very small companies, like companies who make agarbatti, companies who make batteries and all. They are also trying to get onto this digital platform in whatever shapes and form. So there's an interesting trend because they realize the human movement is going to be very restricted. So they need to rely on these, underlying technologies to, like, in their different functions, like finance functions, to generate purchase order, invoices, bill payments, and all those things. So there's an interesting trend. That's what I would say. So I think the digital landscape, which could be like the RPA of the world, or like the entire end-to-end automation, which we call it hyper automation, is there to stay, and it is actually helping the companies here. That's what I would say. Mohit, if you want to add anything here.
No, I think Manish, you covered that part. Yeah, really. I think there's a shift in the operating models and the business models actually, and I think that shift will obviously get most companies to think about innovation and get more creative. Look, we are sitting here doing this WiT conference, right? I think this is a fabulous way of doing a digitized conference, right? So we all land up in conferences. We get there in the morning, we leave in the evening. You interact. So that social interaction is not happening, but you are able to reach through like the WiT conference to much larger audience than the 1,000 people or the 500 people who would have showed up in a hotel. I truly believe that this space will innovate, and what WiT's trying to do is, a little bit of what the operating model is changing, right? And their push to what Manish said as he kicked off of, empowering women in technology is a big one. I wear two hats, at Riftera, and we are setting up this university called Plaksha. And our big goal is to get women in tech, right? Our aspiration is, at least in that world, that 50% of students should be women. It's 18% today in IITs. It was 9% 4 years ago. So can you get 18 to 25 to 30 to 50? I think so. What WiT is trying to do is trying to change the pyramid a little bit, and I think that'll go a long way.
Yeah,
that's true.
In fact, I was just doing some research on it, and in engineering colleges, the women are less. But actually, if you look at India today, and that's why India's got an opportunity for STEM, and especially for women in STEM, because if you look at high-performing women at that level, at university level, 57% high-performing women are in STEM subjects. So believe it or not, I actually had started physics honors in my time, and we were 5 girls in a class of 60. But I'm hoping as the classes come in these years, it's going to be like a 50-50 divide between men and women in STEM subjects. So that's really, really something that I think the world needs, and organizations like WiT are enabling that. So question
Anjali,
to you.
just to add a point here, just to reinforce my statement of companies continue to invest in digital operations. In fact, yesterday we signed up a big deal with an Indian big BPO, and the deal is of $10 million. That itself, justifies that companies continue to believe in the digital investment.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, every BPO contract or BPO IT contract, right? Even otherwise, there's about a 38 to 40% ask for RPA in almost every contract, if you look at it. So I think as we go forward, only see that increase. And when clients are coming, they don't really care a partner like a UiPath or Blue Prism or what have you, or do you have the proprietary capability to do it? But what I'm hearing you say is you've just done a contract like that yesterday, so it's going to go up. There's
absolutely.
Also, like you're running the bank, and I'm in a bank, so I know, and you need the short-term gains, and you're transforming the bank. So you've got a 4-year journey of transformation, but you've got to keep running it and getting your quick hits. You've got to do your RPA, your workflow, and you make sure that stays very efficient. Mohit, the question for you, you've been with the pioneer company in BPM for 20 years of your career. Genpact or Jetkiss was one of the companies that actually started this industry. And they've also been on a transformation journey over the past 6-7 years. I know because I've also been with them till a few months ago. But as you think of what's happening and where the world is going, what do you think companies like TCS or a Genpact or a Wipro need to do? Because it's also related to what you mentioned, the end customer business model. So how is that end customer changing? And therefore, how do these typical offshoring BPM companies need to react and change and be ready?
So first of all, look, I can't preach to all these companies. They are big players and big girls and boys in that space. So I can't preach them. But what I can say is, look, whatever we are seeing, right? And, the last 2 years, I think I've learned a lot. I've unlearned, I've learned. So my process of learning, unlearning has been pretty different. And as we have straddled across the world looking for companies to invest with our partner Warburg, I think what we are seeing is, and that there are different models out there, right? And COVID has happened now, but just in November 2019, we believed in the gig workforce in a big way. We believed that distributed workforce is going to be the future. We believed that the gig workforce is going to be what it's going to be out there in the world. People will want to work, and the Gen Z, as they call them now, and all these kids who are now going to college and will come out in 4 years' time or 5 years' time, the Gen Z would not want to travel for 1.5 hours to work, travel back 1 hour, sit in one place. They want to be working in a very different work environment and a distributed work environment. We believe that that's going to be the space, and we actually went and invested in a work from home platform in the US. Pre-COVID, COVID changed everything. Everybody's working from home. We are doing this, session from our homes. So I think we are already in that journey now. And pretty much, I do think that customers are really going to relook at their overall operating model. One of the things COVID has also taught a lot of our customers is how do you build more resilience into your operating structures, right? It's just not about BCP. How do you build more resilience, right? Resilience onshore, resilience offshore. What is the right operating model? And I think Manish said that the acceleration of digital is actually going to be at 2x and 3x from what it was 6 months ago. Companies will accelerate and digitize and automate by using end-to-end digital technologies with embedded RPA, etc., much faster than they go. And I think once companies start doing that, their operating model shifts will change. What do you do onshore? What do you do offshore? How much you work from home? How much you need to be in office? How do you create collaborative tools? How do you train differently, right? We haven't thought 6 months ago, how do you remotely train 5,000 people, right? It's hard, right? Everybody is used to getting a brick and mortar training module, right? So I think a lot of things will change. How do you train? How do you hire? How do you collaborate? How do you get more efficient? How do you get more effective? How do you ingest more digital technologies in what you do? So I truly believe that we are at a cusp of innovation and we are at the cusp of accelerated growth. I do believe that, this is my personal belief, that the next 6 months could be painful. And I tell this to youngsters who are getting out of college and looking for jobs, that their next 12 months can be hugely painful. But the next 9 to 10 years of their lives are going to be accelerated. Like how? Because this is when innovation is going to happen. And if you look at the top 100 companies today in the world who have done well in COVID pandemic, it are companies which have very different models than they had in the pre-COVID world, right? And their business models pre-COVID worlds were also more agile, more B2C, more automated, digitized. And they have done much better, right? And I think Financial Times took out a list of top 100 companies who have done better post-COVID or in COVID or through COVID, right? So I think we are at that cusp where innovation will be tremendous. And companies like UiPath and companies like ours will innovate and build this whole operating model, which will be very different.
So, you made a very quick reference to the gig economy, and again, to both of you. So as we go into the future, and that was really being talked about before the pandemic, about how that's really coming up in a very big way. Do you really think the shift is happening toward that, or will that sustain? Because as we went through the pandemic, actually, the gig economy had a mixed reaction to it. So some have survived and done better and will, reach the other side. But there's some parts where you were working on project-based, or it was, an hour-based, a short-term assignment-based kind of workforce that didn't survive very well during this time. So just a view on that. Where do you think the gig economy is actually going to go? Will it pause and restart? Is that the future and the preferable future?
I think gig economy is here to stay, right? So look, everything is not unidimensional, right? It's not one way or the other. I think there will be a play for the gig workforce, and there'll be a work play for the workforce which will work from offices, etc., right? And people will want to go to work. Studies in Taiwan are showing that people do want to go to work. They're sick of working from home. I think there'll be a hybrid world, right? And I think gig economy is here to stay. I mean, if you look at some of the large companies, especially in the Valley, have gone out and said they are fine for people to work from home till next year. There are companies who are now maybe smaller saying, I don't care, our people can work forever now from home, right? I think this is here to stay. And I truly believe that the pandemic and COVID-19 has really changed the way we all think. And it's not just we as partners and providers of services. I think our customers have completely evolved and changed, right? And look, the gig has been there for a while. I mean, in our industry, maybe not. Our companies who do delivery and those kind of things are all on gig workforce. I mean, half of them are not employed. These guys work for 4 hours doing deliveries and 4 hours doing something else. There are people who do baking for 4 hours and code for 4 hours, right? So there is so much which will happen over the next, I think, a few years. Manish?
Yeah, I think, Mohit, you made a very valid point. Gig economy definitely is going to stay. And what this pandemic has taught us, which we all never realized, the work from home situation. We always believed getting people to the offices and kind of work and all. Last 4 months have taught us that work can be delivered effectively and efficiently from homes also. And companies have realized that. At UiPath as well, we always preferred, we never enforced the rule of coming to office. That is in our culture. So earlier also, before pandemic, we could hardly see less than 50% of people coming to offices and working from offices. So for us, it was a very natural transition, because we kind of helped them setting up their offices at homes, kind of continue delivering. And we see no impact in terms of deliveries and all. We realize this model is going to work. I hear from companies like CEOs of companies like Google and, some of the cloud companies that everybody is working fine. They have accepted the fact that for indefinite future, they cannot expect employees to turn up to offices and continue to work from home. They do not see any impact. And the work goes on. In fact, yesterday we had a steering committee meeting on office openings throughout the world, and we all agreed, that we wouldn't open offices. We wouldn't even talk about opening offices until October 1st. We will see after that, if there's a right time to at least announce. But we will not enforce people to come to offices in that case as well. The offices will remain open with adequate measures, security measures. So I think this is a very learning time. Last 4 months especially has been very learning and realization time for all of us. What was not thought earlier has actually become more or less reality. So it is going to stay. Workforce, yes, gig workforce was there earlier as well. and the other part of the workforce. I think what will matter at this point in time is the learning, reskilling and learning. If people can literally do the mind shift on that and continue to learning during this tough time, I think more or less everybody will survive.
One thing I want to add, I actually do think that the gig workforce will can bring more women back to work, and the percentage of women will go really up. We see it in Arise, where in the US, 87% of our workforce is women on the platform. 87, and I think that is the power of a distributed workforce.
So it's a good segue into my next question, because I was going to bring up women actually. And I was going to say that, like I mentioned earlier, even though we see that at entry level, there seem to be many more women now in the STEM subjects, somehow when you look at leadership in companies and technology areas, you don't see the same representation. It's a problem actually overall for women leadership, but I think women in technology has special focus. And so there's a number of things, when you talk of women empowerment leadership, it is changes that have to be at the family level, at the cultural level, society, corporate, and governance, right? So policy. So all of those sort of have to come together to enable this. Platforms like what WiT is doing, when they're looking at engaging women, they're mentoring them, they're training them, they've got the enablement with partnerships, they've got the employment with companies on board looking to employ such women. But what's your view? How is the whole ecosystem going to come together to support this? Because I gave you that statistic earlier. You get 34% women in India in STEM jobs, and yet if you would look at senior management, a lot of them have dropped out. So it's I think a far bigger issue that has to go across the ecosystem. Would love to hear when you were doing Plaksha University, Mohit, how you think of the broader system, and from your point of view, Manish, you run a technology company. Is this now the flexibility for women to be working from home? If there was any doubt in anyone's mind that jobs can't be done from home, the pandemic has sort of, killed it. It's an opportunity for women. So what do we see as we go forward? There are larger levers at play, but how can women actually take this as an opportunity and move forward? Manish, so a question to you, actually very different. How many women do you have in your firm? It's a technology digital firm. What's your representation?
So I would say if I look at India level, so we should be less than 30% at the leadership level, And if I look globally, I think around 25 to 30, same range, So this is a very valid point, and I believe that we should definitely kind of create a platform like WiT, which basically takes care of end-to-end, the ingredients of promoting women to the top leadership. And as a company, we do have very neutral status. It's not that we are biased towards any gender and all. We would want to promote the women leadership within the organization. And my colleague Rajesh is also on the call. So he basically kind of takes care of all that initiative, bringing in different, mid-management women into the senior leadership, in different forums and all, and kind of giving them that platform. And through WiT also, we have engaged on that exercise. So as a company, we are unbiased, towards this. We want to promote that. And what I personally believe, if you look at the entry level, mid level, and the senior level management buckets, so at the entry level and mid level, I think both the gender play the same ratios in and around, But I think acceleration from mid level to the senior level drops down. My personal feeling is that it could be largely because of the family background, and the issues or the kind of commitment they have at the home, which basically pulls them to kind of going up in the chain, and that's where I think if we can do a mentoring exercise, kind of help them sustain the pressure, because from accelerating from mid-level to senior management also gets you into a lot of stress and pressure from the work perspective. And if they have to balance both family life and the work life, that's where the challenge actually comes out of. So if there is a way we can kind of optimize that, we can help them mentor, motivate. I think that would help. Second thing, I think the current situation wherein the work from home has become a norm, I think this should help them go up the chain, because it is no longer required to be in office in majority of the organizations. And if they can have the right balance between the work life and the family life, there's a great opportunity for them to go up the chain. That's what I personally believe in.
And Mohit, as you answer that, I just want to add a flavor to it and say, we all have sons, right? So I think there's a lot of mentoring for women going on in the world. And I'm part of that. I mentor. And I've had some great mentors, I think, through my journey. We need to be mentoring men as well. So I think mentoring for men has to become a parallel, because as we bring up our sons, and I have a son too, so I'm guilty, are we actually also mentoring or teaching them about how, if their wife is in STEM, she has the luxury to pursue full-on career, and they have to step up and be supportive in the home space, and our families need to be managed, because that's why most women drop out, because they become the primary homemaker, and they have to look after the family. So when you're looking at a university like Lakshya, Mohit, and as young people come in, are you going to look at how to educate sort of in a broader way the whole ecosystem, family, cultural, stereotypes?
Look, I think I think let me answer this in different ways, right? I think, look, you have to really break glass from a social perspective, right? And India still has some issues around that. It's less in the US. I mean, I know a lot of women leaders who've done very well. They actually, husbands work at home and they quit their jobs and they broke ice, right? Or broke the glass ceiling. I know a lot of such women leaders actually, and I've worked with them and I know them and I'm even in touch with them today.
Right.
So you have to learn. You have to create an environment in your organizations, in your homes, and in the society per se, right? And homes and society is not folks like us. I mean, India is very different across the country and different levels, etc. Right? So we have to all keep on working at it, and organizations like WiT and others will actually drive that change. I actually believe that the generation, which is our kids, girls or boys, I think they are more conscious and more balanced in about their of equal opportunity employment. I think the Gen Z is much smarter about it. They're more socially conscious. They're more socially aware. They're more aware of environment than any of us were in our younger days. So I think that shift is already happening. Schools are embedding that kind of a thought process. It has to go deeper. I mean, India is not about Gurgaon, Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai, Bangalore. India is a lot about other cities, and I think that has to percolate and go down. And institutions and organizations which get built in India or have been built there have to really drive some of that focus and push, right? And really, it is not about numbers, but in the end, if you don't measure things, things don't happen, right? And I like what Manish said, that you have to be an equal opportunity employer, right? And women or men have to be treated in the same way. I would hate, and I've seen it. I've never differentiated. I had a team which was 50% women who worked for me in the past, and I never differentiated who could do better and who could do worse, right? And in the end, where they work from, whether they come to office, whether they, do whatever, as long as in the end you're delivering results, nobody cares. And I think the premise is now that with ability to work from home and ability to be more flexible will get us more women in the workforce, and the percentage of more women in senior leaderships will increase. And I think it's our responsibility as leaders and maybe I'm not an educationist, but we are trying to get together to set up this university to make sure that we have more and more girls coming in and learning and being part of the STEM and engineering journey. So I think it's a start. I think in India we've had that start for over a few years. I think we're going in the right direction, right? And I think that's what I would say. And I'm sure in our lifetimes we will be completely on the other side of the hump here, and completely this conversation won't be happening 20 years from now. I can tell you.
Hopefully in our kids' lifestyles, we will see more than 50% women who are CEOs of the Fortune 500 companies.
And it's happening.
In my mind, then you've reached, you've got success. Okay, so I'm going to move on to a slightly different topic, which is about, like I said earlier, India is sort of seen as being a leader in the fourth industrial revolution. India is a startup hub. India is mobile first, right? So India's got all of this going for it in a way. And as we go through this pandemic, is this really a time for India to view this as an opportunity? And we need to then, come together, whether it's the IT BPM companies, NASSCOM, government policy, about how we can actually formulate, change structure, and be ready for success in 21, 22. Because to that question, that is, what this panel is about, are offshoring times ending? I don't think so by any way. I do think they're changing. So what would be your view in terms of how should India change itself, prepare itself? Because this could be the biggest opportunity yet for us to be ready for the 21, 22 years as the economy picks up. And if you're looking at what IMF and others are saying, they're all saying when it will resurge, it will come back with a big bang. So when this whole COVID, pandemic is behind us, a vaccine and a cure is out there in the world, because there's nothing systemically wrong with financial services which caused the last crisis, this will rebound faster and the economy will surge. So how can India be prepared to take advantage of that and the offshoring BPM IT industry? So what's your view on how India is going to play out?
I think India, innovation, it will help us drive and think more about innovation in India, right? I truly believe that the inertia of any country is driven by its people and organizations, less by governments, right? And governments come and go, but the inertia of people keeps on driving. And the government helps to drive policy change and some of those things. I think the inertia in India is right now there. Pre-COVID, if you talk to a lot of the IT, BPO companies and CEOs, some of whom both Manish and I chat with, there was a little bit of thing, what will happen? Because it was all about the unknown. And as we've come out in the last 3 months, though we are still grappling with the pandemic, I think our companies are more bullish. They're more positive. They're seeing, some level of activity and growth. And I think people are innovating and trying to change things, right? And it's a forcing mechanism. It has become a forcing mechanism for us to think differently. And I think this is a good thing. I think we all needed this jolt to think about how we think about environment, how we think about technology, how do we think about innovation and all that. And I think India will come out of it stronger. Companies globally and in India will come out stronger. And I hope that we support our startup ecosystem more. We pump in more. We make their lives easier. We don't put bureaucracy in. Trying to open and setting up companies is not easy in our country. It's not a one-window shop. I think if we can enable this, I think there are people in this country, young generation, companies which are at cutting edge of technology like UiPath, etc. They can really, really help accelerate what we do.
Yeah,
so I think I'm a bit more positive about things, and I think I look at glass full versus half empty. I'm sure we can look at the other way as well. But I would really think the other way and say, look, what are the 5 things we all can drive to do in our own way, which will help us progress more than we had, and innovate and push startups and mentor and do whatever we have to do to drive that acceleration. I truly believe that there will be more innovation over the next 12 to 18 months, whether it's telemedicine, whether it's bioengineering, whether it's IT, innovation, digital automation. I think everything will start pushing. Education will change, in my view. I mean that's one thing we keep on talking about, that how education would change over the next course of the next 10 years. So it's making us all think and questioning the past, saying what will the future look like now.
Yeah. And like with what we saw happen last week with H-1B visa laws can keep changing. GDPR, so data privacy has become a big issue and a big regulatory area all over the world. So talent is boundaryless. So how do we want to deal with the fact that talent is boundaryless, and of course women in STEM, but there are all of these almost protectionist issues happening in the world for different reasons. So how should we be geared up to sort of have this talent ready to import a job or export a job as and when required, without having to necessarily go through the whole visa and the data privacy issues? So that's sort of where I wanted to get your view. How should we be sort of thinking about it as we go forward? Manish?
Yeah, so just to extend on what Mohit said. So if you look at India, the ecosystem, India is pretty tech savvy, and likely and most likely the tech first kind of crowd we have. Very young workforce. The large percentage of workforce is pretty young, and they are more keen to learn new technologies to kind of get up to speed and compete with the global workforce. So that pretty much works in India. So now, if you talk about pre-COVID, and if you think about the big Indian outsourcing companies like TCS, Infosys, Wipro, and all, so for them the business was as usual. The large percentage getting delivered from offshore, and the delta is kind of on-site, their workforce. So there's a shift in the model which is happening, and so people are kind of. Customers are realizing that they need better control on the workforce, and largely driven by their own security concerns and all. And so these companies have quickly aligned themselves, or at least are aligning. So one of the deals that I talked about is basically to accelerate that growth, because this company realized that they need to stay with their word, and they were very quick to understand what their end customers demand, and they realized that the adoption of digital technology will really help them sustain the current situation. So that's happening. So India, and since you talked about the H-1B restrictions and all, this is more of an opportunity for India. I personally see that, and granted, the different countries are trying to impose restrictions to kind of retain their work within the shore rather than offshoring and all. But especially since most of the majority of the offshoring work comes from the US, so it makes more sense for us to rather get ourselves skilled more appropriately for the next set of demands. So which India is largely tuned for, with the kind of workforce, the young workforce that we have. So it's a good opportunity for us, and I think the current crisis has taught all of us a great lesson. We were kind of getting a bit into the complacent mode, from the last few years. And I think we will emerge out very strongly. I personally believe that.
Great. Good to hear that. I'm glad to hear such positive, thoughts about where India can go. My last question is actually going to be about, and Mohit referred to it a little bit, there are the 2020 graduates coming out. I know Mohit and I have both got sons who are graduating this year. What would be your advice to these graduates who are coming out in a year like none before? So they're coming out with anxiety, with stress, with excitement. What would you want to say to them? And to women? I mean, we may have sons, but what do you want to tell the batch of 2020 about?
My 2 cents, and these kids are very smart, so, they don't need advice from people like us. But, the as it is thing, we are from a different world. I think all these youngsters, girls and boys who are graduating this year, my only advice to them is look, and I think Manish said this earlier, this is a time where you have time. So find a way of doing something which you would not do when you start working. And a lot of kids who are graduating have jobs, and a lot of kids who are graduating don't have jobs. People who have jobs, their job joining dates have got deferred, some have got hired at the same time, and some don't have jobs, right? So the ones who don't have jobs and whose jobs have got deferred and they have to join in July, are joining in August or October. I think this is the time where they should go out and enhance and spend 2-3 months learning, doing a course. If somebody wants to go and do post-grad in 3-4 years time, this is the time to go and take your exams, finish them, because you will not get 4 months of your life. When you start working, we all know it's 8 to 10 in the night grunt work. Wherever you work as a fresher, you have to burn the midnight oil. So you will not get the time to go and learn and study if you are looking to do a post-grad program and do those exams, put them into your repertoire, becomes a really part of your look. And I also believe that there are a lot of people who don't have jobs, and it's a hard one because organizations are not hiring today. They are downsizing because of revenue pressures, because of getting more efficient. They've got more productive with this work from home thing. And I think for some of those youngsters, my only advice is to be, the time you have now doesn't matter. Lifespan of work is at least 30 to 35 years, if not more. 1 year of your life, it gets disrupted in those 40 years, nobody will even get to know, right? So if you're 20 and you're going to work till 50 even, 1 year of your life in those 30 years doesn't matter. Nobody will bother, nobody will care about it, nobody will know about it. And 2020 kids who don't get jobs and will land up getting jobs in 9 months, 12 months, it's like a hall pass here. Everything will be forgiven, right? So this is your time. You got to make the most of it and make the best of it. Because if somebody is interviewing you in 2025 and said, look, I didn't do much in 2020, there's, oh, COVID-19, fine, all good. And I think this is, you have like a one-time hall pass ticket, use it as much as you can.
Thank you, Mohit. Please.
Yeah, I agree. I think, as Mohit rightly said, this generation does not need our advice because they're pretty smart. Honestly speaking, so I have a son who is 11, and I can see his the tech skills at this point in time. So I don't think they need advice. But what we need to tell them, especially the 2020 batch, is that stay positive, stay motivated. This is the time to learn. Utilize this time to learn newer things, newer technologies in life. And they are pretty much aware of that, what's the trend in the market, in terms of tech skills. And utilize this time positively, stay motivated, and the good times are yet to come. That's what I would say. I would love to help some of these kids, as part of my intern hiring program, and Mohit, we will talk about it. I would love to extend my help, to help some of them.
Okay, great. Thank you, Manish. Thank you, Mohit.
Thank you.
Any other last comments? It's been a pleasure. I think I really enjoyed this conversation and debate. Thank you so much for the time. And thank you to WiT for setting this up for all of us to be here, and for technology to make it, despite the fact that we're not sitting in some big hall having a conference. So thanks again. And we'll see you around when the COVID crisis is over in person. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anjali, thank you for managing this, moderating this session. And WiT, thank you for having us on this panel. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, WiT. Thank you, Anjali. Thank you, Mohit. See you.
Thank you, Mohit, Manish, and Anjali.